alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Mike, can you make an announcement? Very good. He's good.
Mike, where'd you go? Thought he was gonna make an announcement, maybe not. Maybe not. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, mashallah. It is a great honor and a great privilege, as always, to be a part of these gatherings. You know, these gatherings are not about any single individual, nor are they about any individual text or single exponent of Islam, but rather these gatherings are representative of a commitment to tazkiyah wa taharat al-nufus, purification, or the purification of the souls. And the fact that I get to facilitate conversation in this space, and usually I speak for about 45 minutes, an hour, and then we have some exchange about the text. Today, he begins, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. He says, Shaykh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili said, Quwiya alayya shuhud, or direct witnessing became too intense for me. In other words, he was having an experience of God, a direct experience, not one mediated by theological proofs. He was having a direct experience of God, a kind of shuhud, or witnessing. He was having an experience of God that is perhaps most closely likened to tasting. How many of you are familiar with the expression, the proof is in the pudding? Right? In other words, if something is really good, you don't have to tell someone how hard you worked on it. You don't have to tell someone how fresh the ingredients are. All you have to say is taste it. And everything will be evident from the taste. Whenever people of this path talk about witnessing, they're talking about an experience of God like that you no longer need the proofs of theologians. I saw it, I experienced it, I tasted transcendence, I experienced irfan, or direct experiential knowledge of God. I experienced it. And he says here that kind of witnessing, it became too strong for him. And this is very important. I think that most of us, when we think about our own spiritual states, we think that we want that intensity of experience, but we are unaware if we could actually handle that intensity of experience, right? Remember in the Quran, you can find this in Surah Al-Taha, Musa alayhi salam, he sees Moses, peace be upon him, he sees a bush burning in the distance. And he says to his family, I feel compelled to go to that bush. Perhaps I will find something of practical benefit there. Qabas, minan nar, like I can get a brand of fire from the bush. Or I will find huda. I will have a religious experience there. So his wife permits him to go. When he gets there, he is spoken to by God directly. And what I love about this story is Moses asked the obvious question. The same thing, because sometimes we read these stories and we're like, they were in such an elevated spiritual state. He asked the same thing I would ask. God, show yourself to me. Right? This will put an end to any doubt, where are you? Show yourself to me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, you cannot behold me. You could not handle a vision of me. Instead, set your sight upon the mountain. And the Quran says, Tajalla. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made some of his majesty manifest to the mountain, and some of the mountain was rent asunder. The mountain was impacted by this, and Moses fainted. He fell out. This was Moses alayhi salam, right? He swooned, he fell out. So here, Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili, he said, that kind of witnessing, it became too intense for me. Bismillah, what's that? I lost my place. Wait. I get too into it, I lose my place. I'm about to find it though. No, I'm not finding it. Wait. I have it in the Arabic here though. He said, فَسَأَلْتُهُ مَنْ يَسْتُرَ عَلَيَّ ذَلِكَ. So then I asked Allah to conceal that from me. You know, this idea of having knowledge that you can handle is very important. You know, the Prophet ﷺ saw a group of people and they were laughing, you know, just having a good time. And he said to them, if you knew what I know, you would laugh less and cry more. La ilaha illallah. That what you really want is the amount of knowledge that you yourself can handle, that you can live with and still be a functional, useful person. There's a kind of knowledge that it's like, I don't want to know that, right? He says, فَقِيلَ لِي. So it was said to me, لَوْ سَأَلْتُهُ وَلَوْ سَأَلْتَهُ بِمَا سَأَلَهُ مُوسَى كَلِيمُ. That if you were to ask God for this direct experience of him, in the same way that Moses, the one to whom he spoke directly, asked, وَعِيسَى رُوحُهُ وَمُحَمَّدٌ sallallahu alayhi wa sallam habibuhu wa safiyu. If you were to ask for this direct experience of God, just as Moses asked for it, just as Jesus asked for it, his spirit, And just as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for it, his beloved and his chosen, لم يفعل ولكن سله أن يقويك فسألته فقواني. He said, rather ask God to strengthen you so that you would be able to handle it. You know, one thing I think about often is that with many things, having what you want is actually more satisfying. No, I messed that up. Wanting what you want is more satisfying than having what you want, right? Wanting, that spirit of longing is more satisfying than having what you want. Think about the person that wakes nightly in the middle of the night to pray to God, to appeal to God, to remember God. And maybe they're asking, give me a sign, show me something, give me something that will make my heart certain, that will make me firm. And maybe they wake up and they do this every single night. What they don't recognize is that as long as they're doing that, they actually have what they're seeking. They actually have what you're seeking, you have. If, on the other hand, they were given what they want, maybe the quest would end. I'm going to say something here, man, to all my single folks. I know you want to be married. Half of you are here because you want to be married. I know it. And there is definitely something to be appreciated, right? There's a certain kind of gratitude that one displays when you are essentially given what you want. But I tell you, it's not the same as wanting what you want. It's not the same. Now, if you talk to my wife, tell her I said having what you want is better. If you see my wife, tell her I said having what you want is better. But I would say in private company, no, wanting what you want, right? And you have to ask to be strengthened so that when you get what you're seeking, you don't become lax or lackadaisical or less intentional or less committed, right? One of the things I find amazing is that even the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum, jami'an, may God be pleased with them, even those of them promised paradise, they never stopped in their pursuit of God's pleasure. Imagine if somebody told you it's guaranteed you're going to heaven. Man, human beings are just too, I'm going to heaven? Okay, I'm glad you told me that, man. I can stop with all this, all this praying and trying to stay away from the haram, and I'm good. Okay, well, okay, man. I mean, a lot of us are that way. I was talking with one scholar, and he said, this is a position of scholarship. He said, you had some people in the Islamic tradition that said, and I want to phrase this correctly, if Allah wants to put everybody in Jannah, He can do that. It would say, if He wants to. And they would say that maybe the khulud, the eternality of hell, maybe not. Even people as scripturalists as Ibn Taymiyyah said that. Maybe we know that Allah's mercy overtakes His wrath. If He wants to, He can do that. And someone said, so why would He talk then about hell like it's eternal? And the response was, what if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told people hell was just temporary? Imagine how some people would. I might be able to do a few days, man. I might be able to, you say a year? I can imagine some of my people, man, I do a year on one leg. I might be able to get a year out of that. No. So it's khalidina fiha, right? So that the wa'id is effective. Some people, if you give them what they want, this guarantee, you have this experience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this might make them more comfortable, more lax. So part of what Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili is talking about is strengthen me so that I can have direct witnessing and never lose my shawq and never lose my passion. I want to be able to witness God without losing my passion for worshiping God, right? وَلِلَّهِ مَثَلَ الْأَعْلَى. Unto God belongs the highest example. But how does one get married but keep that passion, right? Remember when you weren't married, all of my married folks, how you thought when I get married, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. Yeah, try the 5th anniversary, man, whatever, man. Yeah, right. You weren't strong enough for the blessing. You asked for the blessing. Now that you have it, you're not as committed as you were, right? He continues. See if I can find my place again. Bismillah. I don't mind reading in Arabic, but I feel like sometimes the English is just smoother without me going from Arabic to English, Arabic to English. He said, Ahlul Fahm, or people of understanding, take from God directly and place their trust in Him. They are able to subsist thus on His aid, and He relieves them of their concerns and turns away from them that which would cause them grief. He said, people of understanding, they take directly from Allah. He's not talking about understanding text or understanding people that have a direct understanding of God. They take directly from God. You know, in our tradition, knowledge is divided into 2 categories. You have ilm kasbi, which is knowledge you have to earn, knowledge you have to work for. You have to study, you have to travel, you have to sit with teachers. This is ilm kasbi. And when one is pursuing that kind of knowledge, you must be diligent, you must be dedicated. You know, I studied Arabic in Yemen, in Tarim, and I had 2 classmates. One of them, and if he sees this recording, he'll smile. His name was Abdul Sabur. He was the hardest working student I've ever seen. His mother was Pakistani and his father was Chinese. That's a studious combination. He was studious, man. He was studious. He had just finished a master's in engineering at Westminster in London, and then he came to learn Arabic. We used to read these dialogues. He would memorize the entire dialogue, and you could hear him practicing switching voices. كيف الحال؟ لعلك بخير. I'm like, yo, man, I would look at him and think, okay, I'm not that serious about this. I'm trying, but I'm just not that kind of student. And then there was another student, I won't say his name, but he might have been, to date, one of the most spiritually elevated students I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. He really was on a different wavelength than everybody else, right? We would be studying all night for an exam. He would have his sibha, he would have his beads, just sending salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. We're sitting in the qa'ah, we're sitting in the hall, all of us, you know, grilling each other, testing each other on verbs and conjugations and vocab. He would be sitting there, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So we say, Habib, are you going to study? He said, this is my study. He said, I'll send salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. And if it is written for me to pass the test, I will see the Prophet in a dream and he will give me the answers. And he said this with conviction. I'm looking at him like, next day we have the test. Abdul Sabur didn't miss a single question, right? And this is a very difficult Arabic exam. This other brother failed miserably. He failed. When we came to him and said, how did that salawat study program work out? He said, nah, I failed. I said, man, you gotta apply yourself. He said, no, it wasn't that my method was wrong. I wasn't sincere enough. No, it wasn't that this, he said, the salawats on the Prophet ﷺ, fatih. The nuqsan was in my ikhlas. I wasn't sincere enough, right? He was wrong. When you are talking about knowledge that one has to work for, whether it is religious knowledge, medical knowledge, legal knowledge, any other kind of professional knowledge, knowledge of labor, knowledge of business, you must work. You must apply yourself. This is called kasbi knowledge. Kasb in Arabic means to earn something. But there is also wahbi knowledge. Wahab means something that is given, right? Allah is al-Wahhab, the bestower. Wahbi knowledge is knowledge that you cannot extract from books. It's knowledge that is given to you, right? Both of those knowledges or types of knowledge are relevant. Some people don't have a lot of kasbi knowledge, maybe your grandmother, but she might have a lot of wahbi knowledge, knowledge that God gave her. This isn't anything that I learned studying with people. These are things that God has deposited into my heart. Things that, the thing about wahbi knowledge is you might know something but have difficulty explaining it. Somebody might say, what are you talking about? You say, I know it, but it's very hard for me to explain it to you. Because when I explain it to you, I have to use so many qualifications and so many nuances, and then my point gets lost. As long as it's knowledge that is contained within my heart, I don't have to explain it to anybody. I know what I'm talking about. One of the things that made Islamic tradition great is we never denied the validity of that wahbi knowledge, but public discourse is not the place for it. So you can't base rulings on that kind of knowledge. Public discourse is for knowledge that we all have an equal access to. That's where public discourse lies. You can't say, no, that's haram. How do you know? I just know. No, that doesn't mean anything. But if you in yourself say, no, I know something, it might not be suitable to talk to everybody about this, but I know this. Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu, this is a completely valid, authentic statement of his. Abu Hurairah, companion of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated more hadith than anybody, in spite of the fact that he didn't spend a lot of time with the Prophet ﷺ. But the Prophet prayed for him and he had a very prodigious memory. He said, I learned 2 types of knowledge from my friend. Now, he would call the Prophet ﷺ his friend. He said, I learned 2 types of knowledge from my friend. He said, one type I talk to you about in the masjid, I talk to people about openly. The other type, if I mentioned it, you might try to kill me. I'm saying that there's 2 sides to this. There's a kasbi side, there's a wahbi side. Right? I learned things from the Prophet ﷺ that I don't talk to everybody about. Right? Not because it was anything, some of you are like, yo, what did he learn? No, because you might not understand what I'm saying. It was expressed to me in language that might not be accessible to you, but I understood what he was saying to me. You see? But public discourse is not the place for that kind of knowledge. So he said, people of understanding, they have that kind of knowledge. Just not the kind of knowledge that you get from books, but knowledge that God has conferred upon them. He says, and because of this, they place their trust in Him. They have tawakkul. You know, Allah loves the mutawakkilin. Allah loves those who trust Him. And tawakkul is a difficult virtue to realize because it's more than just believing in God. See, you could believe in God, but not necessarily trust God. You could believe in God, like maybe one believes, well, you know, whenever, and I'll be real, whenever my faith wavers, the thing that I always find compelling is the attribute of qidam. Qidam is like, how would you translate qidam? Qidam. From before. Qidam is like before. Right? When we say Allah is qadim, we means that Allah existed when nothing else existed. That's his qidam. He has qidam. And I say, really, as a human being, I have to believe one of three things about qidam. Either I believe that the world brought itself into existence, which is to me, that's ba'idul ihtimal. That's a far-flung idea. It's not a very scientific idea that anything would bring itself into existence. Or I believe the world has always existed. That talking about a creator is irrelevant because the world has always existed. So that the world has qidam. The world has always existed. Or I can believe that God created the world. And whenever I'm talking with, neighbors, people at the gym about why I'm religious, especially if they're agnostic or atheist, I say between those three, the closest to my understanding is that God created the world. That it would actually be more wondrous for me to think that the world has always existed. To think that the world has no creator would be like, SubhanAllah, but what can I? That was a joke, guys. But if I thought the world has no creator, the world is azali, it is sempiternal. The world is eternal. The cosmos, the universe is eternal. I think I would still say, wow. And if I believed that the world brought itself into existence, that there was once no time, no space, and the world just willed itself into existence, that would be amazing. But the one that's closest to my grasp is that God created the world, right? However, that means nothing. That is a philosophical piece. In my life as a father, in my life as a husband, in my life as a business person, in my life as someone that is exposed to all kinds of threats, danger, emotional harm, etc., belief in that kind of God that created the world, merely created the world, that would do nothing for me. Tawakkul is more than that. Not that you simply believe in a creator, but that you believe this creator can be accessed through your devotion. That you believe this creator is protecting you, guiding you, providing for you, defending you. Right? That's tawakkul. That it's more than just, God is more than a philosophical abstraction. God is real in my life. And that when someone asks me, how do you plan on achieving this or that? I say, Inni mutawakkil ala Allah. I rely on God. God will make this happen. And he's saying, people that have that kind of knowledge of God, the definitive sign of their knowledge is not that they can rattle off theological proofs for the existence of God, or that they can acknowledge God as a category, the first cause or first principle, the unmoved mover, etc. No, that they believe and feel God in their lives. It's personal. It's real. It's not just, well, I can't think of any better idea for the creation of the world, so I guess I'll go with God. That's what I was describing. I can't think of anything better. Either the world created itself, it always existed, or God created it. I guess I'll go with God created it. That's not tawakkul. Tawakkul is no, my God is real. My God protects me. My God guides me. Right? That's tawakkul. He continues, he says, and he relieves them of their concerns and turns away from them that which would cause them grief. My understanding of this is not that they don't experience grief. The Prophet ﷺ experienced grief. Abu Talib died. Khadija radiallahu anha died. People refer to it as Amul Huzn, the year of sadness. What he's talking about is not people who everything with them is always okay. It's okay not to be okay. Right? You don't have to, faith does not necessitate, anytime something happens, qadar Allah ma sha fa'ala. It was the qadar of Allah. No, something saddened us. Something's hurt us. But one has, after that initial emotional shock, you have the support of your faith that helps you to put yourself back together. I remember when I was in Egypt in my 3rd year of a 5-year program there, my wife, she passed away, Allah yarhamuha. And it was, as you would presume, a devastating loss. And I was in my neighborhood that I lived in Egypt, and I was going to get my head shaved, and I was just noticeably just despondent. I didn't really speak to people that I used to speak to, that I would speak to before that or previously. And as you would imagine, I was just down. I really, that experience helped me to empathize with people that experience serious depression, because I was just down. I couldn't really get happy about much. And my barber, he said to me, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Then he said, Arab convention, al-baqa lillah, only Allah remains forever. That didn't provide me with any consolation. I said, thanks for the theology class. That's not what I'm. Al-baqa lillah, as if we're studying theology or something like that, and only God remains forever. As I was going to say, you know what? You're right. Al-baqa lillah, only God remains forever. So then he said, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Awwadak Allahu khayran minha." May Allah give you better than her. And then I almost attacked him. Right? And even now, I do think that there is some cultural nuance there. That this is just not something you would say to an American. That's just not from our culture. If somebody loses someone close to them, that you would say, "May God give you better." I know he meant it as a source of consolation, but that's just not, culturally, that's just not, who says that? So, when he said it, I just looked like, I almost like lunged at him, and then he was like, wait. In fact, very Egyptian thing, he's coming, Ubad. Very, very Egyptian thing. Ubat, right? Birah, they have to do their hands like this. Birah. Like calm down. And then he explained to me, he said, I don't mean to offend you, but I do mean to remind you that any good you experienced from that woman was a gift from Allah. She wasn't an independent source of that good. It was good from Allah. And the good news is that Allah is not done giving. Allah is still giving. Allah gave you once and you loved what He gave you. He can give you again. And I was like, for the first time, I said, I actually appreciate that. Don't ever say that to me again. But I see what you're trying to say, right? That, that was good from Allah. Allah's not done giving. Allah's not done giving, right? This is what he's talking about. Not that they don't feel grief, but they have those understandings of what grieves them that helps them to put themselves back together, right? Not that we're stoic, unemotional, that we don't have any feelings because we have faith. No, but we have those things that help us to, subhanallah, after that initial pain, after that initial depression, after that initial disappointment, you have those understandings that you can pull from to reconstitute as a believer. Some people don't have that, man. Some people, the torrent of disappointment takes them, it just keeps going. And you'll have people that will talk to you, especially about addiction, and they will go back to a single moment, like when this happened, I lost my mother, I started drinking, and 3 years later, here I am, a full-blown heroin addict. You say, dang, I grieve just like you grieve, but I had something to pull me back. You just kept going. Subhanallah. Some people, they get in that negative emotion, they just keep going. They have nothing. So it's not that you don't fall into that negative emotion. Everybody does. But you have something that can pull you out, something that can, some understanding of God, some understanding of faith that can rescue you when you've been there. He continues. He says, they distract themselves, literally, they distract themselves with what He has commanded them away from any preoccupation with what He has taken upon Himself to guarantee. This is a direct reference to money. That some people, subhanAllah, their biggest preoccupation in life is money. Where's my next dollar coming from? Where's my next meal coming from? And because of their preoccupation with money, they can think of little else. Like you find some people, and it's not even that these are bad people. I just think that they're reacting to some kind of insecurity. Something makes them feel like if I don't keep two hands on this wheel at all times, my finances, my money, something bad is going to happen. And I can scarcely focus on anything else. I'm saying people that you go to them and you say, you want to make Juma? No, I can't do that. Got to work. And you think, I mean, if you talk to your supervisors, or if you close the business for that 45 minutes to an hour, wallahi, you're not going to lose. In fact, it could be a source of your increase. He just can't. No. Right? No. Right? يعيدكم الشيطان يعيدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء. Satan threatens you with poverty Then he commands you to do indecent things, right? But first he threatens you with poverty. Oh, no, if you don't do that. Here he's saying what? People who know that God provides for them, they are more preoccupied with doing what God commanded of them. They're not worried about what God has guaranteed himself. God has made it his promise. I will provide for you. You don't have to worry about that. Not saying you don't have to work, but that doesn't have to be your primary concern. I'm providing for you, right? Some of you have heard me talk about the stray cats in my neighborhood. I have 3 stray cats in my neighborhood. And look, the power of dua is something else. Ad-dua mukhul ibadah. The prayer is the essence of worship. When my eldest daughter was still living in Chicago, her, my son, and my youngest daughter all got together, sat me down on the couch and said, Dad, please, can we get a pet? I'm not a pet person. I'm like, talking about a pet that's in here scratching up my furniture and pooping and peeing all over the house. Dad, we will take responsibility for training. And I'm like, no, thank you so much. You know, it would have been great. If this wasn't actually for me, that would have been funny. If you're like, no, actually, this is for him. I said, so I was like, no. And they almost got me. They were like, please, Dad. My wife was on their side. Oh, babe, this would be a great opportunity for them to learn to take care of something vulnerable. This will build character. And I was like, no, I just don't. And I just do not like pets. And so they told me and said, well, Dad, we're going to make dua. We're going to make dua that we get a pet. Right? We're going to make dua. And I was like, make dua. I'm not lying. Y'all think I came outside of my house one day. It was 3 cats sitting right there like this. I was like, anybody who knows me, that I'm not one of these people that make up these stories, and it was 3 cats sitting right outside my house. One, the kids called Butterscotch. The other one they called Mothball. And the other one, it was black, they called Shadow. Do you know they would go to the pet store by Fancy Feast? My wife, I have a box of Fancy Feast in my kitchen right now. Feed the cats every morning, every night. I said, man, I'm spending money on 3 pets. I don't want 1 pet. And I'm talking about the cats would come, sit on the porch. My kids would come outside, my wife would come outside, cats, and they would just relax like they've known our family for years, just sit there. I work out in the morning. Every time I leave out the house, Butterscotch is always right there. I gotta go back in, put the cat food on the saucer, put it down. And the thing that would always blow me away is I would think, Allah is Ar-Razaq. Allah is the provider. These cats are eating gourmet cat food. And they're stray cats, right? Sometimes I remember it would get really cold. And then my kids probably know this. I ended up getting really attached to the cats, right? It would get really cold. I would look outside and think, man, Butterscotch, Mothball, Shadow, I hope y'all making it out there. I'm not, with no irony from my heart, I would be like, damn, it's so cold out there. And they'd be like, my wife be, baby, you okay? Just think about butter. Because I would call it Butterino. Sometimes I would come out the house, come onto the porch, say, Butterino. She would come from under a car and just look up. Come on the porch, get breakfast. And I would say, oh man, Butter, man, it's so cold out there. Butter's my favorite. I said, Butter, it's so cold out there, man. How you gonna make it? The minute it got warm, and I wouldn't see for like maybe a week, it gets warm, Butter be right back in front of the door. I'm like, who's providing for this cat? How is this cat taking care of itself with no home in sub-zero temperature? I said, Allah's ar-Razaq. Allah provides. And you, at least, I mean, I can't tell, but you wouldn't be able to determine that these cats had any anxiety about their provision. Hey, man, look, y'all ready to go get some fancy feast? Come on, let's go get it. Let's go get some fancy feast. You know, the little family over there, they give it to us every day, right? And I think to myself, these are animals. We have intellect, and we don't have that much confidence in our provider. Ibn Ata'illah, he said, if you doubt your provision, you doubt your provider. See, some of us don't think about it like that. If you doubt your provision, you doubt your provider. If you are confident, look, this is something that Allah has guaranteed for his servants. And if you can't access that, then that means what? You've died of starvation and Allah has taken you unto himself. And he will provide for you in death. But as long as you are here, God is providing for you. You don't have to. So he says, these people, they are more concerned about what they have to do for God than what God is doing for them. In other words, I don't have to be that concerned about money. Allah has taken care of that. I'm more concerned about making sure that I fulfill my responsibility. What time is it? I'm wearing a old watch, man, and I like how it looks, but it doesn't keep good time. Okay. No, sure. Oh, actually, my watch is keeping good time, man. It's sometimes it keeps good time, sometimes it doesn't. You know, my wife never believes that. Sometimes it keeps good time, sometimes it doesn't. It does what it want to do. He said, they distract themselves with what he has commanded them, away from any preoccupation with what he has taken upon himself to guarantee, knowing that he will neither consign them to any other nor deny them his favor. You know, think about that, man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never going to make anybody else responsible for you. He is Lord. Never is he going to consign you to someone else. Say, look, it's subhanAllah, some people, maybe responsibly, put their children up for foster care. Maybe they recognize I'm not cut out for this. I'm not ready for this. This would only entail harming this child, me being the parent to the child. And they go and say, look, somebody else take the responsibility. You know, maybe some of you have had that experience of bouncing around different relatives. Maybe the family fell on hard times, or maybe you entered the country as a refugee and you went to stay with different people. This person said, it's too much for me, and this person is too much for me. And, you know, I've experienced things like that. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that never happens. Allah never consigns you to someone else. Hey, some other God take care of these people. It's too much for me. That never happens. Never happens. You always belong to Allah. He said, Allah neither consigns them to any other, nor will he deny them his favor. He's talking about people who live with that knowledge, that Allah is not going to make somebody else responsible for us. And Allah is not going to deny us his favor. And if you did ask God for something and you didn't receive what you asked for, know that Allah is not restricting anything from you out of stinginess, because your Lord is not stingy. It's out of wisdom. If you ask someone that you know is unfailingly generous for something and they say no, it's best to believe that maybe not having that thing you're asking for is best for you. They're not restricting you anything out of stinginess, because they're not stingy. Allah's not stingy. And he ends this by saying, I lost my place again. Thus, they enter a state of rest, basking in the garden of submission and the delight of delegating their affair to God. God thus raises their stature and perfects their light. So he says, basically, that these are people who enter raha, they enter a state of rest. These are people that are not as anxious as the rest of us because they have relegated their affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? If you think that you are solely responsible, man, I just saw you in Michigan, man, you following me, man? Allahu Akbar. If you think that you are responsible for something, like completely and ultimately responsible for it, you will exhaust yourself trying to discharge your responsibility. If you know that your task is to just do your best and leave the result for Allah, you can engage just as intentionally, just as effectively, but you're not mentally exhausted. And I'll tell you, there are places that you really see this. One of them is parenting. Y'all, something happens when you become a parent to a teenager. My eldest daughter is 18. I know I'm not as young as I look, you know what I'm saying? My eldest daughter is 18. And something happens. I can't really explain it, but you just look at the state of the world and you become very concerned for your children. Right? Especially at 18, you realize even the delusion I had when she was under my roof that I could protect her from everything, there's no more delusions. This is a fully formed young adult that is going to make decisions, going to make mistakes, going to experience the ups and downs of life, love, relationships, all kinds of stuff. And you just get really scared, man. You think, subhanAllah, man, I've tried to model protection and support and encouragement and all of those things for my daughter. And she could meet a guy, and that guy could model the exact opposite of those qualities, and she could have a bad opinion of men just like that. I'm like, man, I was trying to do this for 18 years, and you met one slime ball, and now all men are trash. That's the hashtag. Man, how do you think that makes me feel as a dad? Men are trash. I've been trying to serve you and support your dreams and that for 18 years, and now I hear you talking on the phone with your friend. Men are trash. With no istithna, you don't even, no exception, like except my dad. Nothing. You get like scared of that. Like, man, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm telling you, it's enough to drive one crazy. If you think this is ultimately in your hands. If on the other hand you say, look, we've done our best, we continue to pray for our daughter, and whatever Allah wants is going to happen. It doesn't mean that you're any less intentional, but you're not as anxious. You say, look, it's for Allah, whatever Allah wants to do. Right? I pray that, everything she wants is given to her with ease, without heartbreak or difficulty or anything like that, but it's going to be what Allah wants it to be. And that gives you just, like, it balances your anxiety with contentment. It's what Allah wants, right? He's saying people that give their affair to Allah, this is their defining characteristic, that rest. Not that they're any less intentional, any less proactive, but it's not the same kind of nail biter, because they realize it's going to be what Allah wants it to be. Right? It's going to be what Allah wants it to be. Right? And that should give you rest, some ease, inshallah. So we'll stop there. Is it actually 8:30? Yeah. Okay, mashallah, it's working today. You know what I'm saying? And we'll open for Q&A, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So you talked about the knowledge of ilham, the thing you happen to know in your heart, and you can't explain it or convey the idea to someone else. I had a finance professor that used to always tell me, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Do you agree with her, at least on an academic level?
No. I don't. Because, and this is, and not to be too nerdy, but she is an econ professor, right? No. Western culture, many people call it a logocentric culture. It's a culture that the deepest understandings of everything are negotiated via language. In cultures that make more space for the ineffable, things that are realities, things that shape who we are but can't be expressed neatly and cleanly in language because they're too human, too messy, too intense, too nuanced, too subtle. Who that has ever had